a guest who's really knowledgeable about privacy and particularly GDPR. I have to say it right. Welcome, Robert Baugh.
Thank you very much. Robert
Um,
Baugh from Keepable, yes.
Baugh, yeah, I have to say it right. Baugh. Um, Keepable, that's your company, but I will get back to that in a bit
Yeah,
because I want to learn where you're coming from, and because you have an, if I'm going through your resume on LinkedIn, you have a very interesting trajectory where you're coming from.
thank you. Very polite. Brownian motion.
No, I really think it's interesting. I really love these kind of things, where you went and how you go, and I like that. So it is a good story. It's always good to learn what happened there and where you come from. So you've obviously been to some great universities already in the UK.
Thank you.
You started off at Oxford,
Yep,
and you started with engineering, economics, and management.
that's right. Yeah, it's actually a certified Masters of Engineering. And it was a fantastic course that there was a study in the UK back in the 70s or what have you, saying, why are so many industries run by accountants when it's an industrial company? Why aren't more scientists and engineers running these companies? And so they started a program. There's lots of different needs. Well, there's a number of those degrees around the place to give engineers the business nous to sort of run a company, or that was the idea anyway. And most of the people off the degree, everyone went into banking or consulting, and I went into law. But actually, what's really interesting is we've all gravitated back to technology pretty well. So there's still a few people in banking or consulting, but the vast majority have gone back into industry. So it's all been entrepreneurs. So it's a high number of entrepreneurs. So it's really good.
And of course, the university has a great name in the world. So how did you decide to take this route? Because I can also, did you already thought about becoming an entrepreneur at that time?
Yeah, so actually, I've always wanted to have my own business, and it's actually been a little bit of a question into how much is it me wanting it or not? Because on my father's side of the business, father's side of the family, very entrepreneurial, always had their own businesses, always doing different things. On my mother's side of the family, very much medical, sort of doctors and what have you, nurses and what have you. And I can't stand the sight of blood, but so I was definitely on the entrepreneurial side. But I always wanted to go on the entrepreneurial side as well. So the degree was very good because it had science, it had management studies and economics, fantastic tutors there. And then I thought afterwards, actually, you know what, and this I'm going to annoy lots of consultants and bankers now, but I looked at consulting and banking and thought, straight out of uni, going into the typical people back in the sort of early 90s, I just didn't see the meaning to it for me. And I thought, that's not where I'm going for. And I'm not necessarily going to learn what I want to have my own business later. And I sort of saw law as a way of completing another part of that education, a business education. And so I went to a city firm that was very entrepreneurial at the time, still is one of the more entrepreneurial ones. And I was there for sort of 5 years or so, and I qualified into the IP department. And back then, there was no IT law. It was just coming through. There was no e-commerce law. And so IP, thankfully, just got thrown IT law because it's all about, copyright. And then we got e-commerce because it was all about computers and code and stuff. So I developed into this, what they call a TMT lawyer. And so, dealing with patents, trademarks, but also telecoms and all sorts of technology aspects, including data protection. So, so I sort of did that. And I realized that if life as a city law partner was not for me, to either to get there or to be one. And I missed having a real direct impact on why are these decisions coming across our desk and what happens when they leave our desk. So I wanted to get involved more in it. So I took myself off to Hong Kong to build up a war chest and to get more commercial, because in Hong Kong, everything's just like a million miles an hour. It's absolutely fantastic. And I interviewed before handover in 97 and went out just after handover in 97. Really interesting times. And it did what I wanted. I built up a bit of a war chest. I learned loads of extra stuff. Obviously, e-commerce came through massively. And it was all blank sheet of paper, legal drafting and everything, very exciting. And I had an idea for a privacy startup there. And I ended up going to Australia. It was the pollution in Hong Kong that made me want to move. And I ended up going to Australia, and I went to another city law firm there, but I couldn't get rid of this idea of this privacy business. And so I started it, but I got my entrepreneur visa for Australia the day that the dot-com bubble burst in 2001. So I was in a bit of an awkward situation, but I went for it. And I got an offer of funding, but it had to be from a government incubator, a ludicrous offer actually, but valuation. But I had to be matched in the market, and I decided to pull the plug on that one. I'm looking at it with the way the market was at that time. Lots of VCs were going, actually, you know what, maybe a cat website isn't the best thing that's going to happen in the world. So they were sort of looking at their own portfolios. And I realized I wasn't really the right person to take that one forward. It was much more of an advertising one. So I wound that up and I came back to the UK, and then
Hold on.
Sorry,
You're really speeding through.
I'm whacking through, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But I'm just gonna hit the brakes a little bit.
No, for sure.
Because I'm still intrigued. I think is a good word. Why you move from engineering to law? Why you move from economics and management to law?
So for me, it's a continuum, and so actually, I was looking in the typical milk round at the different opportunities, and I wasn't getting excited by any of them. And actually, my girlfriend at the time was going to go on to law school, and I hadn't really considered it. And I looked at the actual material she was going to be studying. And I thought, this is really useful, knowing how to do a business, knowing about contracts. It's all case studies. This is really interesting. And my intention was to qualify as a solicitor and then start my own business, be it a law firm or be it some other type of business. And so, I went through being a lawyer, and I realized the city firm wasn't for me, which was fine because that stays with my trajectory. And then I looked at, well, what else shall I do? And so going to Hong Kong was a way to, there was no point moving to another law firm in London. They were all, the big city firms were all pretty well the same in terms of the opportunities you have. At that time, it was also very difficult to move out of law. Like the old saying, you can do law and you can do everything. I think lawyers are very capable, but society doesn't want a lawyer to do anything other than law if they're a good lawyer, particularly in the UK. I think accountants in the UK can sort of go on and be CEOs and what have you, but far fewer lawyers. I think it's the reverse in the US. I'm not sure about the Netherlands, but so I decided, well, I'm not really going to get an opportunity into another business necessarily that I want. So I'm going to have to create that myself. And then that was the driver to go to Hong Kong, which was basically blank sheet of paper, build up the war chest for a startup, which is what I did.
But still, I mean, having the idea of going abroad and really doing it, that's a different kind of thing. Were you alone at the time, or do you have a partner or somebody that you live with?
So I was alone at the time. I remember, this is going to sound incredibly pretentious, but I remember when I was coming through the last couple of years of school, and I was talking to my parents, and I said, I've decided I'm an Epicurean. And they're like, well, what the hell are you talking about? You snob. And I was like, no, what I mean is, there's no point in dying with a ton of money under the bed and all you've done is work. That just is, I don't see the point. That's not a life well lived. And Epicurean is, you go through life and it's about experiencing all the experiences there are. And that's real wealth, and having, and so making the most of your life. So the Hong Kong bit for me, it's always, I've taken a series of pretty large leaps at different times through my life. I mean, I'd never been to Hong Kong. I didn't know it. I'd been to Singapore. And handover was happening. I mean, at that time, people in Hong Kong, there were discussions from, well, when it goes back to China in 1997, the impact might be that you just can't get a Mars bar, or the impact could be the PLA are all over the streets and everything's locked down and families are disappearing. There was massive extremes. No one knew it was going to happen. So it was a real leap into the dark. But I think that, it's all about this experience. It's all about different experiences, which is why I sort of walked away from potentially very lucrative opportunities. I was moving into sort of partnership stream at different firms as well. Actually, I don't want that lifestyle. I could have stayed in Hong Kong and just sort of, I was starting to feel quite hollow. I just had to get out. I loved the law, don't get me wrong. And I loved the law firm I was with at the time, but it just wasn't feeding my meaningfulness or that feeling of I need those experiences. And so going sort of from engineering, economics and management into law, it was all about this learning and continuing the learning of what was really useful. And then going to Hong Kong was about, well, I'm sitting in a place, a city law firm, which is fantastic. It's a very good law firm, but I didn't want to progress in it. And so I actually was sitting off, I haven't told anyone this. So I was sitting at my desk and there was a Law Society Gazette sitting on my desk, and on cover down. On the back was a junk in Hong Kong Harbor. And I literally went, that looks really good. I looked into it more and I thought, low tax, I can build up a war chest. I've never been here. It's a real challenge. That's the next stage. Let's go for it. And there was a lot of nerves because, I thought, how am I going to advise on Hong Kong law? I don't know anything about it, but it's very much built on the UK legal system. And I sort of, and so, no, it worked out really well. It was absolutely fantastic move. And so then I went down to Australia, which was a similar sort of thing. And then I had a go at the startup when I was down there, which again is a similar thing. So it's always these sort of, they've worked to varying degrees, but you've got to go through life with meaning.
And at some point when you decided to close down the Little Red Gate, that it was time to come back?
Yes. So what I felt was, so in Australia is a very wonderful country, and I had the my homepage for my browser was The Age, which is the Melbourne newspaper, fantastic newspaper, and I was following the local Aussie Royals football team for about 4 years after I came back, and I thought, no, I've got to cut the ties. But Australia is very much like city states. It's like having sort of Singapores around the place. They're all so separated out. And living in Melbourne, if you heard news about Sydney, that's external news. And if, you might hear about the Southern Hemisphere, but you won't really hear too much. And so it felt quite isolated. And there's obviously there's a lot of different opportunities there, but it's quite a tight-knit community. And so I just felt that coming back to the UK would mean that, and also I was looking at raising finance in Oz, and I got an offer from a government-backed incubator. It was one of the first incubators there. It was a real early stage of VC, and it was just so much more developed in the UK. Even though it wasn't anywhere near the California level, it was very much more developed in the UK. And so I just felt it was time to come back and see family and friends and get back into a sort of an environment where there's sort of more opportunity at a broader range.
And a smaller country.
It's the size of Victoria. It's crazy. It's got 60 million people in the size of Victoria, which has 3 million people. Australia's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I haven't been there, but I can imagine. So I won't go through all your history with all the companies you work for, but at some point you've decided that GDPR is an important topic, and you really want to help companies with that, right?
Yeah.
What is it that you saw there?
So there's a bit more behind this as well. So basically by that point, I'd been working in SaaS companies as a general counsel, but also as a commercial role, being a director or an EVP. So I deliberately joined startups at the beginning that didn't need full-time legal. So I was doing ops, I was doing QA, I was doing cold calling, I was doing absolutely everything. And we grew, I was the third commercial into Ring 2. We had 4 engineers in San Fran, including the CTO founder. And so we grew that to over 100 people, 4 countries, and listed it on the junior market in the UK with lots of up, down, sideways, and all this sort of stuff. But I was a really active member of the senior team, and I was doing, everything, as I say, from the minutiae through to the strategic deals as well. So in that sense, I got a real immersion in SaaS. And I was headhunted on Listing Loop Up. I was headhunted into a different company, and that had a different journey and pivoted into digital health. And my impact on that other company was such that I thought, I really need to do my own business again. And I left after the Series C funding, which was a really interesting one. And I was going to start a different type of business, which is a managed service provider business, which I think will be, your audience will probably know quite a lot about them. So managed service providers, typically 8 to 12 people, often founder led. They're technology companies that look after the IT for other small companies.
Yeah. My previous conversation was with Joshua Lieberman. He has such a company that you're describing.
Yeah, and so I've instructed them in the past, and I was thinking, I'm familiar with them, and I thought, you know what? The UK market is massively fragmented about this. And I reckon I can do because I bought the services. They're not very good at selling their services as a rule. And apologies to MSPs, some are very good, but A lot of them are local, it's founded by a techie who does really nicely, adds further techies to the team, and they hit a point where they go, this is a really lovely lifestyle business. If I want this to really grow, I need to do stuff that I'm not so comfortable with. So I'm just going to stick here. And so what I thought was, I'm going to start one or buy a small one and then do a roll-up strategy in the UK. So it will solve. So anyway, it's a really interesting strategy. It was starting to happen in the US around 2017 when I was looking at it. Hadn't happened in the UK yet at that point. And I was really looking at doing an MSP with a bit of a consulting bit on the top on compliance, and then rolling up other MSPs in the UK into this brand. I think it's still a great strategy. It's just started in the UK. Anyway, so I was looking at them. You can tell I'm enthusiastic about it still. So I was looking at them, and they were all, this is summer 17, and they're all going, you know what, we're being asked about GDPR by our customers, and we know about data protection from a technology point of view, how to protect data, but we don't know about data protection from a legal point of view. And we're scared of GDPR because of all these fines. And I thought, why aren't they using the SaaS that's out there? There's got to be SaaS out there for this. Because as a general counsel, two roles really. One is you manage the risk in the business. So be it data protection, security, health and safety, rights at work, whatever it is, you take all this complex area, you make it as simple as possible for the business to do, because the business is already doing complex everywhere else. So you just make it as simple as possible to manage the risk, meet your obligations. And then what you want to do as well, particularly with a growth company, which a lot of people in the role miss because they don't necessarily have to do it, but you make use of that really good work and you demonstrate it to others in a way that it gets you through investor due diligence. It gets you through vendor due diligence and overcomes sales objections. People don't necessarily use all that good work on risk management and compliance as a sales tool to speed the sales cycle, open up new opportunities, etc. So I was looking at it, I thought, well, why aren't they using SaaS? Because I'd been doing those two different roles using spreadsheets, and it was all horrendous on spreadsheets, and I never had the budget to sort of do anything more. And SaaS was at an early stage. And so actually I started Keepable. I looked at the existing GDPR SaaS out there. At the time, there were two particularly big players. And I thought I was looking at a DevOps interface, and it was actually the user interface. So complicated. And I thought, for the vast majority of businesses out there, they've got no idea what GDPR is. They're not going to be able to use this. So I thought there's got to be a way I can create a mass market compliant SaaS, and actually to deal with privacy and security, which are the two operational compliance issues that every business needs to do, particularly if you're an aspirational business, and put privacy and SaaS together in a compliance SaaS offering. And you'll know Simon Sinek, the start with the why. And so my start with the why was, because again, it's got to have meaning. My start with the why is to joyfully use tech to solve people's headaches and make them feel happier. Now that's the why. Because I know that when I was general counsel and I was doing the role, it was like, all the money goes into product and sales, and you're trying to just sort of do everything you can on a massive landscape with very little resource, very stressful. And I thought, if I can make that person's life happier and make them easier in their job, I've done a good thing. So, and I want to have fun doing it. I want them to have fun using it. So that was why I started Keepable. I did, and that's, so that's the origins of Keepable.
Yeah, it's really smart. That's not the right words. I wasn't going to say that. It's not smart. I think the way that you started is, especially with the why, is really beautiful. That's what I'm looking for. Not smart.
Thank you.
Beautiful. And so GDPR. I think there is still so many misunderstandings about this, right? If you talk about in schools, for example, right? If you have your child in school and they want to send something to you and they can't, supposedly, because of GDPR, which is not true at all, but that's the way that they say and make it sound very interesting, or actually maybe even very difficult. So in just simple words that anyone can understand, and you must know those words because you have a SaaS business, and you sell it on your website. So what is the really core of this, and why do you need to take care of it as a business owner?
Sure. So GDPR actually is an evolution, not a revolution. So we've had those data protection laws around for decades. It's just nobody cared about them because the fines were only 500,000. GDPR came in and said, right, the fines are now 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover, whichever's higher. So for example, Grindr is an app for people of a particular sexuality persuasion to meet each other, and sexual preference is a special category of personal data. They were sharing it. They were sharing the location of people, and they were sharing lots of different information about them, that they were on Grindr as well, with a wide range of advertisers. And they've just, the notice of intention from Norway's Data Protection Authority to fine them 10 million euros, which is actually 10% of their turnover. So they've jumped over the 4% and they've gone for the 20 million euro limit because it's higher. They make 100 million grinders. They've gone for 10% of the revenue because they didn't get the right consent from people using it. And because it's special categories, it needs to be protected more. So that's just an example of how easy it is to step on a landmine about GDPR, and also actually that some businesses quite willfully go walking off into a minefield on it, thinking it's not going to affect us, it won't harm us, and all this sort of thing. But as soon as it does, it really does. It can really take down a business. So GDPR is about protecting the personal data of people, protecting the rights and the freedoms of individuals by properly protecting their data. It's different to privacy. Privacy is, I've got a right to a private life. No one can walk into my house, for example, or I can close the curtains or whatever it is, or my expectations of privacy. Data protection is the rules and regulations to protect people's personal data. When you're sharing it, when you're using it, there's nothing wrong per se with sharing personal data. And GDPR's second half of the title is about the free sharing of data. But you have to do it within the rules so that you're protecting the individuals. And that's basically what GDPR is. And the reason everyone's concerned about it is because of these new massive fines and the risks. So that's put it onto the board register. So boards are now saying this is a huge risk for the company. What are we doing about this? It's gone up the register for individuals. Around May 18, you will have had 1 million emails saying we need to reconsent you to all these different things. So suddenly everyone was talking about GDPR. One of my friends said someone raised GDPR in the pub. They're like, what is going on here? So the individuals know about GDPR more and they see these fines. So they're exercising their rights more. And then partners and customers, like I say, if you can go for, particularly if you're finance or you're tech, people go, before I give you our data, how are you going to protect it? And so that's security and privacy. And so that's why it's on everybody's radar now. That's why everybody needs to look at it. And it's not a question of, do I use SaaS or not? It's a question of, do I comply with GDPR or not? And I think you just have to. It's the law. You've got to comply with it. It's a bit like saying, do I bother doing accounts? And once you've decided you've got to do accounts, you go, well, do I use a spreadsheet or do I use something like Xero? And it's a pretty obvious answer. And so the marketplace, the customer marketplace from our point of view, around May 18, there was a lot of interest, particularly in that consent stuff around emails. Then we entered what I call the GDPR trough. Interest fell off a cliff because there were a lot of myths out there. It was the Wild West. A lot of people who were security or IT were going, I'll get you GDPR compliant, just do 27001, which is not GDPR, doesn't get you GDPR compliant. It's one bit, it's security. It's very good, but it's one bit. So there's a lot of Wild West out there, a lot of misinformation, a lot of people saying it's Y2K, it'll blow over, it doesn't mean anything. And so, or we're too small, it doesn't apply. And so there was a massive trough of interest. And then it takes time for fines to come through. The fines started coming through, but also, if you do business with the government, you have to show good GDPR. If you're in the finance industry, well, almost every financial services company now has GDPR in its internal audit. If you raise money, the investors are going to ask you about GDPR. If you're any size of large customer is going to ask you what's your GDPR policy? How do you treat this? And so it's really become business as usual. So by the end of 2019, it started to really become business as usual, but certainly pre-lockdown, sort of January, February, March 2020, we noticed a real change. It went from bleeding edge to leading edge to now adoption. So when we say we're privacy SaaS, people don't go, what is privacy SaaS? Why would I use that? They go, okay, great. Do you do this? Do you do that? Do you do this? So they may be looking for a fridge that's also a toaster, that's also an oven, or also a dishwasher, but at least they know they want white goods. You know what I mean? So it's sort of, it's getting better.
And GDPR, that is a European law.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because it's an international podcast, so what I'm trying to do also is getting these viewpoints from different parts of the world, right? Because I think that the US will look completely different at this. Of course, not if they do in business in Europe, but if they not use it, they will just say, okay, you cannot do business because you're from Europe. I visited websites, you cannot visit the website because you're from Europe.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it's a similar thing if you're in the Far East. It's again very different. You know, China is completely different on privacy. So that's why I'm trying to get all these various point of views and to understand, and also to give people all over the world these ideas that it is different. So you may be used to one part and not understand what GDPR is. And so what I'm trying to do is to also give these people an idea.
So on that basis, since conventions from the 50s through, there have been data protection principles have been relatively settled. So the big one is the Council of Europe's Convention 108, which was in the 80s, and it's been around for quite a long time now. Actually, today's Data Protection Day, celebrating on the 28th of January, the date that it was made available, Convention 108 for signature. And if you look at the conventions beforehand, you look at Convention 108, which is actually a legally binding convention signed by 47 countries. The principles in there are GDPR's principles. You know, the principles in GDPR, there are 7 principles. They were there all the time, all the way through the old Data Protection Directive in Europe. And when you look at other laws around the world, so California, for example, you mentioned the US. So the CCPA, which is an incredibly badly drafted law, but it's a law that came through in California on their ballot system. And it's very heavily based on GDPR. And then there's a new one, the CPRA, which is coming through to complement that and really make much more of a GDPR style methodology. Brazil's LGBT, very much based on GDPR. India's taken some cues from GDPR. GDPR has become the gold standard around the world. So if you're an international organization and you're thinking, how do we run a privacy governance for our company? You go, well, what are we going to start off with? And you start off with those principles. And those principles are pretty well the same everywhere. And then you go, right, now let's look at the harshest system. So maybe you go for GDPR as one of the most strict systems that embodies those principles. And then you look for localization around that. But if you're in the EU, obviously, or EEA, GDPR applies directly, you've got no choice. If you're in the UK, we've now got the UK GDPR, another podcast conversation with a bottle of wine. But we now have our own UK GDPR, which is literally, they cross out the EU and write the UK. I mean, it's exactly the same. And we've got our own little bits that go on top of it, but we've got the UK GDPR. So if you're a UK business, you have to deal with the UK GDPR and the EU GDPR if you sell into Europe, which, 40% of trade, etc. If you're in the US, you're in Australia, we've got customers in the US and Australia use us as a sales tool to show customers in Europe that they actually take GDPR seriously. So GDPR would apply to the section, if you imagine a pie chart, GDPR would apply to the section of processing that's caught by GDPR. So if you're a US company and all you do is in the US, GDPR won't apply to you. But if you're a US company and 10% of your business is selling to consumers in Europe, then all the processing around that 10% is covered by GDPR. It's an important thing for people around the world. It's pushing all the laws around the world. Those principles are all in international treaties, and you can get caught by the territorial scope, even if you don't have any establishment here in the UK or the EU.
So, and of course, this is your profession. This is what you do. You've been working on this area for a long time, and but for most businesses, it sounds like a difficulty. Like you said, now we accept that it is there, and we will use it because not just out of fines, because we understand it's good law. But it took a while to understand that. The importance of the safety of the citizens, of the civilians, of the people, and I think that is the beauty of this. Is what we as business owners may forget. It is, of course, a lot of extra work that you need to take care of this, But the idea is that you make it safer for the people that buy your products and or subscribe to whatever you sell. And of course, um, as a as a business owner or as a CEO, whatever you are, an IT manager, you are also a person in the world. So at the same time, you are happily secured from bad things that could happen from your profile, because companies just love to sell your data to companies just to make money. So I think that's something that sometimes may be forgotten, that
Yeah.
it is about the person's data, and it's not just your clients, it's also you as a person have data that you don't want other people to be.
Absolutely. And so, for example, Cisco have got a fantastic data privacy benchmark study, 2020. It's their third one, and it establishes across the world there is a 2.7x return on investment for privacy spend. And in the UK, for some reason, it's 3.5x. But part of the benefits that they identify, apart from shortening sales cycles and investor cycles, as we've discussed, helping to win more business in that sense, customers love it. We're in the trust economy. There's a great Salesforce study on customers and trust, and it's trust is something like 75% more important this year than last year, and all these different aspects of establishing trust with the customer so they'll do business with you and stay, and you retain that customer. But also, it's one of the only risk programs a business will run where you're absolutely right. The risk is about the individual. So you do security. Typically, the security program, you identify information around the place, you secure it. You secure it more if it's sensitive, and the risk is to the enterprise of what happens if that's breached. And finance risk, whatever else, PR risk. It's all about enterprise risk. GDPR says, I don't care about you as an enterprise. I'm only going to care about you because I'm going to fine you. What you've got to do is make sure the individual doesn't get hurt. And that could be your employees, or it could be the external people. And it's amazing how many businesses go, but we don't process personal data about anybody. I go, that's interesting. I thought you had 2,000 employees. Yeah, we do. Well,
That's people.
yeah, exactly.
We have in the Netherlands right now some difficulties there as well. We have this health organization. I'm looking for the right words. And what they are doing is they do the registration. So once they've found that somebody is ill, so they do the test, and they find that somebody is ill. They also do the follow-up and find out who's all been in contact with that person. So they do the contact research, and now they also do the vaccinations, and they are registering a lot of information from the person that they vaccinate. And obviously, when you're in such a big organization, and all this has been set up in quite a rush, things are not going very well. There was kind of like an export function on this data stuff, and two people sold 20,000-30,000 profiles.
Wow, right,
and
right.
and it would have been not so a big issue if the amount of data that they kept was like limited, but they ask you everything. It's stuff that they really don't need, right?
Well, this is interesting because in GDPR and in all these principles, one of the principles is data minimization. So don't ask for data you don't need. And there's a sort of tendency to just ask for more information. It sort of feels more official, or you think you might going to be able to use it. But if only ask for the data you need, and only keep it for as long as you need it. So, for example, in the finance sector, once you've established someone's identity by looking at their AML KYC documents like passport and utility bill, and you've established their identity, why keep it? You can get rid of that and just record the fact you made the decision. Whereas if you keep all this stuff, you've got this sensitive data that could cause a lot of issues for people. And the same with coronavirus and the testing. So here in the UK, it's awful to hear about that breach, but as you say, things were put together quite quickly, but really a lot of people should have known a lot better. So, for example, in the UK, the government said, okay, restaurants and bars, you should, not must, you should take contact details of at least one person per party when they come in, right? Now, huge amount of confusion because they didn't say you must, they said you should. And people, a lot of people, like I say, the Wild West were going, you have to do this and you have to, and no. You compare it with New Zealand, they passed a law saying you must take this data, right? Very, very clear. And then you go, okay, so in the UK, what happened? A lot of people were being stalked, like, you know, women were going into a pub and then a bartender was calling them afterwards or sort of emailing them and all this sort of stuff. Things were written down on paper. And then New Zealand, you look at it, and the UK Information Commissioner put out a little bit of information, but not very much. And they were saying, we're waiting to see what the government's doing. But in the UK, the public has been ahead of the government on coronavirus the whole time. Everyone started working from home before the government said to do it. When the government said go back to work, the public said, actually, I don't think so. When the government said all these bars and restaurants need to collect the data or should collect the data, while they were all talking about it, bars and restaurants were just straight in collecting the data. Now, you look at New Zealand again, the Data Protection Commissioner in New Zealand, fantastic work. What they did was they issued privacy-friendly badges, and they reviewed certain coronavirus solutions. Because there's more than one way to do it. And they gave privacy-friendly badges to the ones that said, okay, this is great. There was one in New Zealand, all off QR codes. So you download the app, you go and you scan the QR code of the location. Your app says, I've just checked into the name of the location. And they go, okay, thank you very much. If there's an issue, they can just say in the app, you need to alert everybody who is here at this time. No personal data changes hands. This was out there for free in New Zealand for months. And in the UK, you got people at bars and restaurants writing stuff down. And I was like, why is that the case? Why not transfer that good practice? And I think one of the things with GDPR is trying to just put in good practice. And one of the things we do at Keepable is we're focused on giving people a great answer on GDPR easily. So we try and really demystify it, traffic light system. We've got a policy pack. We try and put it all in plain English. So it's very, very approachable by people. And the more you do that, the more the governance comes in, the more it should stop that sort of an easy breach.
Okay. I want to talk to you forever, not forever, for a longer time, but I also want to be not too long in this episode and keep you too long. But I think one important part is to give you the opportunity to make clear what you get from your tool, your product, because it's a SaaS product. Okay, that's clear. So it's software. But if I'm a business owner, how does it work? What are the steps?
Yeah. So maybe if I put in the context of how do I go about GDPR, then you'll see how we fit in. So if you're a business owner and you say, right, I need to do GDPR, or in a larger business, you're in compliance or you're in IT, most people in organizations up to about 3,000 or 5,000 people strong, be that a company or a group, the people dealing with GDPR are not privacy specialists. They're specialists in IT, they're specialists in security or compliance or ops. Maybe it's finance regs or maybe it's insurance regs or whatever it is, but it's not privacy. And the company's gone, right, Robert, you can have GDPR. Fantastic. And everybody's gone, Robert's got GDPR, we're saved. And Robert's gone, oh my God, I know nothing about GDPR. And they feel very vulnerable because they can't say to their colleagues, I don't know about this, because everyone's going, but you're the person who knows about this. And they can't say to their paid advisors because their paid advisors might fleece them and charge them lots more money. So poor old Robert's sitting there really feeling very vulnerable. And so depending on whether you're the business owner or you're this person who's been handed GDPR in the business, you're sitting there going, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I remember when I did 27001 for an international group, it felt like I'm not sure how the sort of what the Netherlands phrase for it is, but the petition walls that are made of plasterboard where they're non-load bearing. So they're just a thin bit of plasterboard really that and it just finishes off the wall. And I had this feeling on 27001 when I was reading through everything, getting into it. I was just banging my head against the wall going, I can't get this, I can't get this, I can't get this. And then all of a sudden, my head just popped through this sort of plasterboard wall. And I was like, oh, no, I get it now. And so there's like, what we're doing is we're accelerating that moment. And also you don't need to know so much about it. So what it means is in Keepable, it's much more plain language. But what you would need, you'd still need someone to help you. So we have a network of consultants. So unless you're a larger organization where you have that understanding and you can do it yourself, maybe you've got a person with a particular interest. Typically what we see is an organization will go, right, we've got no idea where we are on GDPR. We don't even know where to start. So they'll come to us or they'll come to a consultant, and then we'll basically say, look, it's the three of us. It's the people, the process, and the technology. What the consultant will do is say, right, you need to have someone in charge of it as a senior sponsor in the business, someone in the business who's the day-to-day lead. It might be the same person in a small business, it might be two different people in a larger business. The consultant will bring in the immediate knowledge transfer to say, this is what GDPR all means to that core team. And then instead of putting it into spreadsheets, they put it into Keepable. And what that means is it massively accelerates. We're just going to do a case study going up shortly with a consultant who helped a fintech through on it. You know, if you put it into spreadsheets, you need all these different spreadsheets. You're never sure which is the latest version. If someone's changed something, you can't do comparisons, all this sort of stuff. You put it into a SaaS product, and it just, everyone can see it all the time. And it enables all this SaaS stuff that you can do more than you can on spreadsheets. It's obvious, like it's like Xero for finance. Again, I mentioned Xero, but HubSpot for sales. You can run sales through a spreadsheet, but putting it through HubSpot is just much better. So as they put the stuff into Keepable, saying, you know, we know you do, if for finance, we know you do invoice payment, you do payroll, you do tax to the government, you do expenses. For HR, we know you do recruiting, you do employee benefits, you do return to work health interviews, you do sick leave records. So you can go through that central person, the day-to-day lead and the consultant can go through doing an interview with the relevant people in the different departments. And this project methodology holds all the way through to the big companies. And so they go through saying, we know you do these sort of things. What else are you doing? Who are you using in these different processes? And all the time, the core team is just feeding this into Keepable, and we instantly create all of the different records. So when I was doing the consultancy before launching Keepable, we were talking before the interview, I did very much a lean startup approach. I was a consultant for a consultancy. I was the GDPR specialist for a consultancy. And I did it to take my prototypes and MVPs through that stage. And, you know, when I was doing them on Excel spreadsheets, a total disaster. I put them into sort of Google Sheets, it was a little bit better, but I had all these different scoring engines everywhere. I had to download this, put in. And so I went, right, now I know what the SaaS needs to be. And I put it into the SaaS, and it just really sings. So as you're going through completing once in the SaaS, you just get this multitude. It just feeds through in all these different records. You know, you change once, it feeds through everywhere else. And so it makes it much, much faster, much, much easier. The reporting is accurate. The reporting can be really visual as well. And so I was talking to a consultant in the US last week, and their customer was using a service that's incredibly hard to use. And there's this record that you really need in GDPR called Article 30 records. It's basically like a mini table, like an executive summary of all the data you have. And they needed to get it out. Someone walked past and said, I'm going into the board meeting. Can I have our Article 30 records? And they couldn't get them out the system. It was just so difficult. They ended up calling customer support. And on ours, it's just right there, click a button, there it is. So what it does for business owners is it accelerates your understanding. It accelerates your time to get compliant. It makes it really super simple to maintain that. Lots of visual records, board reports, downloads. You can download everything, do what you want with it. And also it works really well with the consultants that you're going to have, because you need that extra expert to help you through in the beginning. It's a bit of a sort of a bigger project to get compliant and get that transfer of knowledge. And then once you are compliant, you're using Keepable as an ongoing thing, and you're having that consultant probably on a retainer just so you can bring them in to help if you have a breach or a data subject request or this sort of thing.
Right. Okay. This will be my last question, because you just mentioned it and it was already in the top of my head. Data subject requests. So somebody, an employee, asks a company, what kind of data are they keeping of me?
Yeah.
How does that work?
So actually, great question. So a shameless plug with a mug. Privacy Kitchen is a series of free videos that we're doing for those people, our personas that we sell to. When I was selling to them, I was noticing, you know, when they heard I was a general counsel, and then the sales meeting would become like an agony aunt session for a couple of hours. You know, do you think we should do it this way? What about this? How about this? And so I thought, how can I leverage that? So Privacy Kitchen is basically a series of free videos that run through different aspects of privacy, not just GDPR, but other aspects as well. And we've got a fantastic one on data subject rights that's just gone on the YouTube channel as well. And it runs through all that. But basically, there's about 10 different data subject rights in there. Anything from withdrawing your consent to saying, are you processing data about me? What data are you processing about me? Can you erase the data about me? Can you correct it? Can you port it to someone else? There's loads of different rights. The main one people look at is the access right, where someone says, give me a copy of everything that you've got on me. So the way that works is that can come in any different way. And so you can't force someone to use a particular form, for example. So one of the big fails is people don't train the customer facing people in their organization to recognize when a data subject access request has been made. You've then got 30 days to reply, and you've got 30 days not just to reply, but to fulfill that request. So you need to go and look for all the data on that individual in your systems. You then need to redact it out, which means to block out all the information that's not about them. So it's not a right to the documents themselves, it's a right to the data. So, if they're on a meeting record as being there and they said something and it's one paragraph, they're not entitled to all the other paragraphs if it's confidential information for them. And you can't disclose information about other people. So you can see as soon as you start scratching the surface, you can get into this enormous area. So we're launching our data subject rights module very soon, and that's going to help with the management of it all. But in terms of being able to do it, for example, we deal with the management of it all and having the log and the records of it. There's a different sort of vertical in the privacy tech industry about people who help you find that data and redact it. And one organization like that is on the content capture services, is on that Privacy Kitchen video. And Shad Kayani from Legal Lines is a consultant who help people with everything, including data subject access requests. So I'd recommend people look at that recording. It's a lot of fun. There's a story about a prison, and there's a quote from will.i.am. It's really good. And it's basically just preparing. So that's where Keepable comes in with the policies and everything, and knowing what's happening to the companies. Allot someone as the person who should know about this, and the person that everyone turns to go, have I got one of these here? What should the next step be?
Right.
And so it's not a mad panic.
Robert, thank you very much for your insights, your history as well, of course, by how you got here, but also learning more about GDPR and about your program, Keepable. And I loved it. I learned a lot. So thank you very much.
It's been really enjoyable. Thank you very much for having me on.